Right. Okay. Can I ask if Councillor Tiago Corrales is on the call? If they could confirm that, if they are or are not. Okay. As I see nobody, I will move on to Councillor Theodore Jupp. Are you on the call, Theodore? Okay. Councillor Alex Powell.
Yeah, present.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor John Broad.
Yeah, present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barry Wood.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Besmira Brasher.
Yes, present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Charlie Hicks.
Hello, yes, present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Felix Bloomfield. We haven't heard from Felix, but I'm just double checking if he's on the call. Okay. Councillor Lee Rawlings. I've seen Lee.
Present. Sorry, I had to unmute.
That's all right. Thank you. Councillor David Turner. I don't see him yet, but I know he's certainly going to try. Councillor James Barlow.
Present.
Okay, thank you. And I think some other people are just joining now. Councillor Andy Cook.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor Emily Smith. Emily, I think you just literally just joined or got in. Just to check. Yeah, I can see you're in the call, Emily. So we will hear you in just a second.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having.
Yeah, okay, I could hear you. Broke up a bit, but I could hear you. Councillor Debbie Hallett.
Hi, I'm present. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Councillor Sandra Simpson.
Yep, here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Julian Cooper is, I understand, no longer on the panel as of yesterday. And I have received an apology from Councillor Michael Brooker. So sorry that was a bit convoluted. But we can now move to the first item of the agenda, which is to seek a chairman of the meeting. And I wanted to ask if there are any nominations. So just asking if there are any nominations.
Who's prepared to stand? Emily?
So we probably should have, as the vice chair, probably should have arranged this ahead of time. My understanding, Councillor Wood, are you prepared to stand as chair, and I'm planning to stand as vice chair? Is that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it if the panel would like me to. Yes.
Great. Well, why don't unless there's anyone else who wants to put themselves forward now, I'd be very happy to propose Councillor Wood.
Yeah, will we have a seconder for that? It can be anyone.
Yep, I'll second it.
Yep.
Councillor Broad.
Thank you, Councillor Broad. Well, just double checking, there are no other nominations, so I would pass over to you, Councillor Wood, as the chair of the panel, and to seek a vice chair nomination.
Okay, well, thank you. It's a bit of a mild surprise, but yes. So I think we had a volunteer, didn't we, for vice chair?
Yes, Councillor Hicks.
Well, I will propose Councillor Hicks.
Okay. Seconder for that?
I'm happy to second. Debbie Hallett.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hallett. Okay, are there any other nominations for vice chair? No. Okay, just double checking. In that case, I would declare you Vice Chair Councillor Hicks, and Councillor Wood, we can move on to the next agenda item.
Okay. I'm just loading up my agenda now.
So the next agenda item is we've kind of already done. It's apologies for absence. I have, just for the benefit of people that have just joined the call, I've noted the councillors that have joined the call after I started doing the roll call. So thank you very much to you for that. I think, yes, Councillor Jupp just asked me to note that. So I've got that. Thank you, Councillor Jupp.
Okay.
And
Okay, then. So item 3 then, Kevin, would be minutes of the previous meeting.
correct.
And we're asked to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of March last. So we're going to rely on those who were there, really, I guess, to say that there's nothing amiss with those minutes. I see no hands.
I propose we accept.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee. Is there a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Thanks, Emily. Are those good to see you, Emily? I have to say.
I do.
Nice to see you again. It's been a long time. That's all I meant. So proposed and seconded the minutes of the 11th of March. Are we all agreed? I'll take it we are.
Agreed.
Yep.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Item number 4 then is public participation, and there's one item on this, I think. Kevin, have I?
That's correct, Chair. And they were quite specific in asking for me to read it out. That's at your discretion, but I'm prepared. Members would have seen it. It's been circulated, but I'm very happy to read it out. They did request that.
Okay, and can I just clarify, because why not clarify? What has this got to do with us? Why? I'm not sure I understand why it's a public participation subject. Do you know what I mean?
It's here because relates to a report that's on the agenda. So the Housing and Growth Deal report.
I see.
Specifically the HFI element to it. But you are correct in terms of the report to this panel, and as you all know, to the FOP itself, is just primarily for noting. As well, I'm not sort of don't want to get into answering the question now, but the responsibility for delivery of the HFI program is, of course, the county councils.
Yes, I understand. Okay, that's reasonably clear, or more clear than it was before you told us that. So I think the best thing to do is for you to
sure, I'll crack on. Yeah. Okay, so this is from Councillor Richard Parker on behalf of Sherborne Parish Council. Sherborne Parish Council is a key stakeholder in the Watlington Relief Road WRRR scheme, and the parish is severely impacted by the proposed project. The proposed Watlington Relief Road does not have planning consent, and the application lodged by Oxfordshire County Council under the reference is the subject of a significant Regulation 25 request, and in itself will require further public consultation. SPC are therefore particularly concerned to note within the Oxfordshire Housing and Growth Deal update at the end of Q4, which is the report that's in the agenda, at para 3.2, it says scheme delivery update and risk management, and para 3.2.4 that there is reference to WOR and that a planning decision is anticipated later this year. There does not appear to be any minuted previous discussion on the proposed WRR for which there is no planning approval, and the scheme, even if approved, cannot be constructed before the 31st of March, at which point funding via DLUC, or Ministry for Housing as it now is, will expire. The FOP is being asked to note a number of schemes which do have plan permission or which are not dependent on plan permission, and some that have identified a step change in housing delivery and which are competing for funding. And it therefore appears to SBC that the FOP scrutiny panel are being asked to accept a significant risk for an unconsented scheme. There is no transparency as to why this scheme has appeared before the panel, or any updated and current construction costs to compare with the budgeted cost. The current Annex 1 Housing Growth Deal presented at the committee meeting shows no procurement contract and has been signed, and that an appointment contractor is to be confirmed. Whereas the same annex presented at the last committee meeting showed a procurement contract signed in March 2022, an appointment contractor in October 2023. We request that the panel investigates the WRR proposal carefully, as this is an unconsented and uncosted scheme taking funding from other consented schemes in the county. So that's the conclusion of the statement and the question, Chair. We do have officers from the County Council on the call, Valerie and Kathy, who can give a response. I would say that obviously this report is the next agenda item anyway, so there will be time to, sort of discuss it further under that item. But just to say, if you're happy for Valerie to give a response and she's happy to do that, then she can give it now.
Well, I think that would be wholly appropriate, please, if we could do that, Kevin.
Sure. Okay, I turn to Valerie then. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Councillor Wood. Yeah, I think in response to Councillor Parker's question is that the Q4 report provides an update on all of the schemes that are wholly or part funded by Housing and Growth Deal. The Watlington Relief Road has been in the programme since 2020, so the report provides an update on this as at the end of March 2024. It's part funded through the Housing and Growth Deal, so only the Housing and Growth Deal element would need to be spent by the 31st of March 2025. The report further also notes the scheme is subject to a decision later in 2024, and that, and I'll paraphrase the paragraphs in the report, item 3.2.4, the planning decision for Watlington Relief Road is anticipated later this year, and work is ongoing to assess the impact of this and the ongoing deliverability of the scheme. Item 3.2.5 states that a final update on the schemes will be shared with FOP as part of the report of Q1 of 24-25 later on in September of this year. We are currently assessing the impact of this on the deliverability of the scheme, and as well as updates to other schemes within the programme where there's ongoing activity, and we will agree updates through its governance process. It should also be noted that I picked up on the question regarding to the procurement and the contractor appointed as possibly bad phrasing on our part, but the consultant. So where we say contractor, we procured a consultant, a design consultant, to fully design the scheme, and that had happened previously, whereas a building contractor has not yet been appointed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So my suggestion, Chair, would be that we don't sort of debate that now. We just move to the item itself, which is the next item, and that would be the answer which I will give in writing, or a slightly tweaked one that I will give in writing back to the representative of Sherborne. So at your discretion, Chair, if we move to the next item, that will also be Valerie and Kathy, although they may have said some of what they were going to say, they may have already said. But if you're happy, I can see Kathy's raring to go.
Okay.
Thank you,
well,
Kevin.
off you go, Kathy. You can't beat raring to go, I always say.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep. So for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Kathy Wilcox. I'm Head of Corporate Finance for Oxfordshire County Council, and I'm going to do tag team with Valerie tonight. So I'll start off with just an overview of the financial position for the Housing and Growth Deal schemes and the Capacity Fund, which are the two remaining strands of the Housing and Growth Deal that are still ongoing as at the end of last year. So we are a little bit behind. It's where we were a month behind where the June meeting was cancelled. So I will do an update on that. I'll hand over then to Valerie, who's going to just do an update on where we are with all of the schemes in the programme. We've got a mixture. Obviously, we're in the last year of the programme. We need to spend the grant funding by March 25. So we're in the sort of final stretch of the year. So as Valerie said, we will update on the process that's ongoing at the moment to just make sure that we are maximising the use of grant funding by that point in light of other decisions like the planning permission outstanding for Watlington Relief Road. So the report sets out, as I said, the remaining two strands of the Housing and Growth Deal as at the end of 23-4. There's a little bit of preamble at the beginning that's just a reminder about the governance around the scheme and the update that came out of the letter from DLUC in December 22, where they extended the use of they allowed us to use the grant funding over a longer period, noting that there is a really strict deadline of March 25 that we need to abide by now. Probably also worth just noting there that the County Council does hold the risk if the government require funding to be repaid or if it's unspent or deemed to be misused. So everything I'm saying is in that context as sort of County Section 151. So in terms of the spend, as at the end of 23-24, we had total expenditure of 86.5 million, and the spend in 23-4 was just over 20 million pounds. To utilise all of the remaining grant funding, a further 56.3 million pounds needs to be spent in 24-5. And there's an additional 1.5 million for safety audits that we have agreed with MHCLG can be used after March next year. Just to note, again, as we've said this before, that because of the deadline, grant funding has been prioritised towards schemes entering the construction phase that can meet that grant deadline and or have other funding sources that can be utilised after the grant deadline. So some of them here are a mixture of different funding sources and will continue after next March. So Annex 1 sets out the grant allocation against each scheme. I did notice as I was looking at this, something's happened to the PDF, so it's slightly confusing that we've lost the totals off the bottom, so we can provide an update on that if necessary. But the spend, it reflects the numbers in the report, so the planned spend in 24-5 is the 56.3 million. And overall, it remains we're over profiled by 1.6 million pounds, and that is again to make sure that we can actually utilise as much of the grant funding as we can, and we're expecting that sort of as we move forward through the year will fall out through the contingencies built into some of the schemes. And the other bit I would just wanted to just touch on is the Growth Deal Capacity Fund, originally totaled £5 million. At the end of 23-4, we'd spent £115,000, and that left a remaining balance of just under £1.2 million. Paragraph 3.3.5 just sets out linking across to the other item on the agenda around local area energy planning, and also the cost of potential social value brokerage scheme to be led by the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership. So once those, if those business cases are approved and taking account of some other ongoing costs that will be met from the Capacity Fund, most of that will now have been committed. So yeah, the only other thing I was going to just go back on the Housing and Growth Deal is obviously we need to spend, we've got recycled funds. So early in the Housing and Growth Deal, we used some of the grant funding to fund other schemes that were aligned with the Housing and Growth Deal principles. That effectively has been released back. So it means that remaining recycled funds totaling just over 26.2 million need to be fully utilised in 24-5 before any further grant funding can be claimed. So on that basis, it anticipated that the remaining grant of £30 million will be claimed retrospectively from MHCLG in the last quarter of 24/5. So we are working really hard to just make sure that we're managing the risk around this. Obviously, that is getting really close to the deadline. So it's just actually just trying to make sure that we're mitigating risks as far as we can. So I will stop there on the finance side. I can see Councillor Rawlins has got his hand up, but shall I get Valerie to continue with the schemes first? And then
By all
we can come
means,
to
by all
questions.
means.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kathy. So yes, as previously reported, and also shown in Annex 1, the Growth Deal programme currently remains over-profiled by about 1.6 million. We currently are managing that with contingencies that are holding across the schemes and is constantly under review to make sure that we are making use of the entire Growth Deal funding envelope. Construction is currently ongoing for Benson Relief Road, Wantage Eastern Link Road, Kidlington Roundabout, and Banbury Road Roundabout. The North Oxfordshire corridor scheme at Cathington completed earlier in 2024. Our construction contracts that have been agreed and have been entered into for Lodge Hill. Construction is anticipated to start in October 24. Typo in the report there. Steventon Lights, also construction start in September of 24. And since the Growth Deal funding element needs to be spent and claimed by March 25, other funding sources, including, for example, Section 106, will be utilised to complete schemes that are still delivering beyond March 25. Planning decision for Watlington Relief Road is anticipated later this year. And as we said earlier, work is ongoing to assess the impact of this and ongoing deliverability of the scheme. And again, final update on the schemes will be shared with Future Oxfordshire Partnership as part of the report for Q1 of 24-25. That's my updates. Thank you.
Okay, Lee, you had your hand up, I think.
Yeah, some general and some specific points. Listening, it sounds as if the risk of losing significant infrastructure funds is modest from what I've heard tonight. But it did occur to me whether there would be any merit, if there was a risk, in asking and seeking the opportunity to extend the deadline. If there are particular things that got in our way, if there's a new government, is there a possibility that they would be supportive of enabling that infrastructure need to be met? So that was the general question. And I'd like a little bit more clarity, if I may, on the Watlington Relief Road. I mean, that had been supported by the local neighbourhood plan. It's been on the table for a long time now. It has genuine need and support from the local population. They actually, through their neighbourhood plan, took on considerably more housing than they had to have by means of their allocation in order to get that road. So strong was the local wish to do so. So in my understanding, what we're doing with the planning is detailing how the road is delivered rather than whether it's worth delivering. And I know that there are certain parties, including Shireburn, one or two people in Shireburn, who are influential people who have always been business to the scheme. But that the suggestion, and they've often been quite litigious about it, I think. So I'm not surprised by their questioning and their detailed questioning, but I would like just a sense that my understanding that Watlington is probably bumping in the right direction is a fair reading of the situation. I'm not asking you to sign in blood. I know you can't do that, but I'd be like, I just find it helpful to have an indication of whether we think this.
Kathy, do you want to take the question on the deadline? Or
So the deadline, I think, obviously we would have a conversation with MHCLG, but I think it is very unlikely that they would agree any further extension to this. I think the letter sets out that this was it's a really firm, strict deadline of next year. So I think obviously, as you said, we would have a conversation, but I would be doubtful that we would receive any further extension beyond the one that's already been granted for this. So as I said, we are doing our best to maximise the use of the funding and make decisions now to make sure that we have utilised as much of the funding as we actually can.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding Watlington Relief Road, then, in terms of the planning, planning was submitted in December of last year. We have had a lot of consultations, as you probably are aware. We've had a lot of objections to the scheme that have been logged, and a big number of objections to work through, including some from the Environment Agency. At the moment, the team are working through, I think, about 52 objections and a Reg 25 letter to respond to, and the Planning Authority indicating that Planning Committee will probably only happen towards October, November. But yes, it should be noted that as a county council, we are committed to the scheme.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take the other names as I see them on my little list before me. So, Charlie, you're next.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Kathy and Valerie. Just a question on governance. I understand that this now sits entirely in the county council. Is that correct, rather than in the FOP, the growth deal funding?
Yes, as per the report following the letter from DLUC, what was agreed following that was that the governance sits with the county. So paragraph 2.2 does note that the county council makes all decisions on the allocation of the remaining grant funding, but also holds the risk.
So I just wanted to make sure that in terms of governance and scrutiny, that it's sitting in the right remit. Because I also sit on the place committee, and I don't want it to fall in between the cracks, if that makes sense, in terms of proper scrutiny. And is that something that you've spoken about with Anita as the monitoring officer, and making sure that scrutiny is going to the right place? Because what I don't want to happen is that here can't do effective scrutiny because it's not actually in the FOP. It's not done by the county council, and then there isn't effective scrutiny anywhere.
Can we take that offline? There's obviously a conversation. It's working its way through the capital governance process. If you chose to scrutinise, I think that's your choice to do that. So can we take that away as a county council question, and we'll deal with that at our end, or the county council end.
And sorry, one other question, if that's okay, Chair, which is that this recycled money, could you clarify, has that been already allocated, or is that for reallocation now?
So it was basically a range of schemes. I can't remember all the detail, but there were some schools, for example, that were funded early on that were sort of linked to housing growth. So what we're doing is effectively recycling the funding. The funding was used for those housing and growth deal funding, and we're releasing the funding that would otherwise have been used for those back now. So we need to use that up first. So say if there was section 106, we would have switched. That's all we've done. We've just switched the order that we've used it.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Andy Cook next.
Hi, people who've been on this panel for some time will no doubt have a very good idea of what I'm going to ask about, because I'm going to be very specific, and it's probably not the right place, but I do have to ask. One of the issues in my ward, and I said it was a bit specific and parochial, the Milton pedestrian and cycle bridge, which was defunded, cancelled, and every time this comes up, there's promises that we'll get it put in, and the need for it is kind of redoubled for me, because I'm going to get it in the neck from our new MP who lives in Milton and cycles everywhere he goes. So I better at least ask the question. With some of these projects that didn't get funded, such as that, what's the forecast for them?
I suppose with plenty of those schemes, where we can, and we've got, we are seeking further funding, which we, for example, have been successful on for Lodge Hill, for example, which released some money back into the growth deal. for Milton Heights Bridge, I know that in terms of deliverability, it was no longer seen to be deliverable within the envelope of well, the funding deadlines, etc. But yeah, I can only say that there are priorities within OCC, Oxfordshire County Council, and we would seek to either find funding elsewhere again to keep those projects within our pipeline and move them back onto our capital program.
Basically, no real news, no update, and I should just keep banging on, which I will. Don't worry.
I suppose the
Thank you.
context that I would add to that is if you look back at the budget that was agreed in February 24, the funding for capital generally that was available to the county council was quite limited. So it's not that we're choosing not to fund it, it's actually that it is really, as Valerie said, we've got lots of needs and we are having to really prioritise really carefully. So I think, as Valerie said, I think we remain the same as the note last time, that we are seeking funding and that we would seek to do that, but we need to find the funding. It's not that we're sat on a pot of funding that we haven't allocated.
I know.
Yeah,
it's someone has to speak for the projects that don't have a voice.
Okay, thanks. I'm conscious I need to speed up a bit. So if I ask the remaining questioners to be, as it were, concise. I think what we might do, if it's all right with officers, I'll take 3 at a time. You deal with them in a block. That might be a good idea. So Debbie, you're first.
Okay. My question has to do with paragraph 3.3.5. So I'm aware of the work that's been done on the growth deal, but I'm not aware that the growth deal included the local area energy planning or indeed the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership. So I wondered if Kathy and or Vicky could address how those things have come to be within this growth deal report. Thank you.
Good question. Sandra.
Thanks. Yes, sorry, another specific thing. If you're needing to spend money, is it possible to finish the car park at the Ensham, the park and ride thing, so it can actually be used, having built it?
Yeah, that would be a breakthrough. Good point. Emily.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so if I do something funny, it's because I've pressed the wrong button. Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment, if I may, for you, Chair, to Charlie, that this definitely, in my personal view, should be going to county scrutiny as well, and possibly audit as well, just to make sure that everything that county members are happy that everything's being done as much as it can be to make sure we spend this money. I had a couple of questions. One was around, it's 56.3 million is a lot of money. So how confident is the county that this is all going to be used and we're not going to lose any money? And how are those risks? How is the risk of it not being spent being mitigated? I think it was Kathy, that mentioned mitigation, but I'd be interested to know what sort of mitigation is happening. And the other thing was just to check that I'm assuming, and it would be good to have reassured, that there are conversations going on with all the districts about this as well, with the district officers and planners, particularly because potential impact on housing delivery.
Okay, we could deal with those 3, please.
Shall I come in on the capacity fund one then? So that funding was slightly different context. So we did receive the funding back in 2017-18. It was expected to be used over the life of the programme. And it was to be met to help and aid housing delivery and agreed the delivery of the Oxford Joint Statutory Spatial Plan. So I don't know if Andrew might want to come in, but I mean, I think the expectation is the local area energy planning helps with that sort of the enabling the growth across the county. So it has been included on that basis. And the same with the Inclusive Economy Partnership. So this chunk of the funding is a separate grant to the main housing and growth deal. So we're not claiming this. We have this and we're holding it. So basically, we're trying to utilising the rest of the funding in line with the principles of the wider housing and growth deal.
I will come in if that's all right.
Yeah, because I don't know whether Andrew wants to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. I was ready to do so. So you read my mind. Apologies for colleagues who don't know me. I'm Andrew Down. I'm director of the Future Oxfordshire Partnership. One strand of the housing and growth deal that is sometimes overlooked, in addition to the planning and affordable housing and infrastructure, was the productivity strand, which was a series of projects which were largely led by Oxlep. And one of the pieces of work they did early was an energy strategy in relation to that, and there was other work around skills. And so I personally, I think Kathy's explanation is right, but I think also the continued work on energy and the social value brokerage will promote productivity. So I think these are pretty clearly in line with the original intention of the funding. In any case, it's Section 31 funding, which is relatively unconstrained in how you use it, and as Kathy says, we've got it. So I think, you know, my view is that these projects are completely in tune with the original purpose.
Chair, may I ask a follow-up on that?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for explaining that. So it was part of the LEP responsibility, which is now, I understand it, over with the county council. So my question is basically, what does that have to do with FOP and the growth deal? I suppose the FOP review will handle that, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, the growth deal was signed by the 6 councils and the LEP, so they were a co-signatory to the deal, and that's why I mentioned that the productivity work stream was a part of the housing and growth deal. And yes, the LEP functions have survived, although the overview governance has shifted as they've moved into the county. So yes, you're right, there is some work to work out what the future shape and governance around the LEP looks like, but the work programme continues.
Okay, and other questions that were asked in that little block?
Yeah, shall I move to the park and ride at Aynsham? Councillor Simpson's question. We delivered that scheme with a portion of the growth deal money. Other funding came from the DFT and other funding bodies. It forms part of a greater scheme called the HIF2, sort of the A40 corridor improvements, and is very much still on the agenda to be delivered later on, connecting all of that up again. Regarding Councillor Smith's question around, well, not on the scrutiny, but around confidence in spend and mitigation, as we've got contracts that are currently in construction, spend is significantly ramping up. So we are confident in the spend going forward of all of those contracts. Just also to remind you again that we currently over-profiled by about 1.6 million. And we've got a 1.5 million that we will be spending sort of in the later years as a retention fund to deal with our safety audits, etc.
Okay. Thank you. I go now to James Barlow. I'll ask another block of 3, starting with you, James.
Thank you, Chair. I got a couple of questions. One following Councillor Cook's question. I noticed in 3.3.2, I think it was about, I think it's Annex 1 actually. I'm curious about the proportion of the spend that's specifically allocated to active and public travel rather than simply roads. Annex 1 suggests that's about 4 million out of 143. And I just wonder, given we've got net zero aspirations, how are they reflected by this proportion and how those choices have been made? And forgive me, you know, I'm new to this scrutiny, so we may have gone over that before, but I ask them now anyway. And then my second question is following Councillor Hallett's about 3.3.5 about the that paragraph. It's good to read about the community-led housing support. I was just curious about the scale of this spend, given it helps us with potentially things like social equity. Thank you.
No, thank you. John Broad.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of quick things. You wouldn't expect me to miss out on the House Lane realigned road, which of course was financed, then it wasn't financed, and then we were told it couldn't be financed in the time. But it seems from what you're saying that some of it could be. From what you were saying about the other projects, that is it possible for the planning of the road to be done with this money and then the actual build to be done later? Did I understand that right, or is that not correct?
That's not quite right, but I'll let officers put you right, so to speak. And last now, take two, Charlie.
Thanks, Barry. Yeah, just following up on James's point, very much agree. And it does, this is more for the notes with Kevin and to officers. It feels like this funding sits in a different world to the LTCP5, to the Local Transport Connectivity Plan 5. It doesn't feel like that there has been any attempt to align this funding to the County Council's transport policy, even though that was passed in 2022. I'd invite officers to prove me wrong, but with that allocation of spend, it doesn't look like it. And with the LTCP5 monitoring report, the targets are going in the wrong direction. So are there any officers or County Council cabinet members making the case that the growth deal funding should be spent in a way that aligns to the targets? And if not, then how does the County Council think that it's going to get to the targets?
Good. Don't know. Give me one on sport. I ask officers to comment on that if they like, but I suspect the key to this bit of business is in its name, and that the whole purpose at the beginning of the operation was that this would be money that would help release houses. I summarise, but that was the drift of it, and that's why the construction of roads that opened up a bit of land for houses was often on the list.
If I may quickly, Councillor,
yeah,
just come back, but so that we don't go into a massive debate about this, but the whole LTCP5 says that you can deliver houses through other infrastructure means, and that would be the obvious. It's that key assumption that you just put forward there is the crux of the whole debate. Anyway, back to you.
Yeah. Well, that is, of course, my simplistic understanding of it, as it was then, Charlie. I stand to be corrected. I get corrected every day in my life. Go back to officers to sweep up on these last points.
Thank you. So, yes, I think exactly like you say, Councillor Wood, the fund was agreed in 2020, so well before the 2022 LTCP targets were also put in place. Notwithstanding that, where we can, we do seek to include active travel on all of our schemes. But yes, this infrastructure is there to release the housing, and as such, the schemes that came forward at the time and that received the funding are the schemes that we are currently have in the programme. I think the LAEP that's been dealt with on the Highways Lane realignment scheme, again, that was taken out, but is currently back in our capital programme because we have got officers working through sort of planning that. And yeah, also we don't just seek to do a feasibility scheme only. Some of those schemes became feasibility schemes only if deliverability was seen not to be achievable. But with the Highways Lane, for example, that's a project that has received some further funding, not through the growth deal, but that is being currently looked at the moment by our officers in conjunction with officers at Cherwell District Council.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. It's been in-depth questions, quite rightly, and I thought comprehensive answers given. Kevin, is there anything that we need to do from your point of view of, for the sake of argument, summarising this?
No, I mean the report to the FOP itself, the recommendation to the FOP is that it note it. So you're basically sort of doing the same thing. I just noticed before you move on, Chair, that Councillor Barlow has his hand raised again.
Oh yes.
Sorry, yeah, I may have not been listening correctly. I just wondered about the question I had about the community-led housing support, and forgive me if I missed that. I was just curious about the scale of it, and given it's in there, it's great that we're doing that kind of thing.
Is this still the question? Sorry, Kathy, yeah, leave that with you.
I was just wondering whether Andrew wanted to come in on that one. It relates to the capacity fund, I think.
It does, yeah. So there's a couple of projects that are still in the fairly early stages. From my best recollection, the intention is to that there's a community hub. I can't remember the name of the organisation that promotes community-led housing, and the intention is to use a bit of funding to provide them with some extra capacity. I think 2 days a week for a year or two, something like that. In order to build more capacity on community-led housing. I apologise for being slightly vague on it. It will come forward as a business case at a later stage when it's worked up in a bit more detail, but I think that's the essence of it.
Thank you. It's very helpful just to get a sense of the scale. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, good. Well, thanks everyone. I think I can safely go now to the next one, which is the Inclusive Economy Partnership update.
Yes, Chair, and I believe Emma Coles, my colleague Emma, is on the call, or should be. She was.
I am.
Hopefully
I am,
still
Kevin.
is.
I'm
Yes.
here. Thank you. So thank you, everybody. I have submitted a report providing an update on the activity around the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership since our annual report was presented to the FOP in November. For those of you who are new, the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership brings together private, public and third sector organisations to look at addressing the economic inequalities we face across the county. And we focus on 4 key areas where we feel will make the greatest difference. And that's around inclusive employment, focusing on the barriers people face getting into employment, as well as the barriers that are put in place by employers. We look at social value in procurement. So how do we increase the amount of social value through our procurement processes, and making sure that the social value is directed at the communities that need it the most. We also look at educational attainment from sort of school readiness up to 16. And also we have a place-based focus as well. All of my key updates are included in the report, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of them. So we've made really good progress since November. Some of the key highlights, we've had the opportunity to participate in 2 research projects. One of them is through University of Oxford's SDG Policy Lab, and they've created a community fellows arm to that. And OIEP was chosen as one of the organisations to take part in their first round. And through that, we had a focus on community hubs. What do community hubs look like across the county? What's sort of best practice nationally and internationally? And what could the development of community hubs look like across the county? We've also participated in the Local Policy Lab, which is a collaboration between the County Council, Oxford Brookes and the University of Oxford. And we had 2 students looking at developing our theory of change and looking at what evaluation frameworks we might want to consider to really measure our impact as a partnership. And we'll have some people completing some further research on that in the beginning of the new year. So in total, that's about £90,000 of in-kind resource. And then on the horizon, we've got an intern who'll be starting working with the partnership in August through the Crankstart internship programme from University of Oxford, which is for people from households of £32,000 or less. They get a variety of support initiatives, and one of them is a paid internship. We're working towards establishing an early years summit, or holding an early years summit in the autumn, bringing together practitioners, academics and businesses to look at how we might address some of those issues across the county. And then later on, at some point over the summer or in autumn, we will be doing a press release, as the majority of the public sector organisations have now signed our charter. So we'd like to do a bit of a celebration piece on that. But I'm happy to take questions now on my update. Councillor Rawlings, I think your hand was up first.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of points. At page 25 on the report, there is this theory of change material, and it's awfully difficult to read because it's white out of various other fairly pale colours. Now, I would just ask if we could in future, if we could do it in a way that the writing would stand out much more clearly, so that it was easier to read, because this is quite difficult, especially in small font. So that was a small point. A more general point is what we're doing with vocational training. We've talked quite a lot about retrofitting and stuff like that, and building skills in that area. We notice across the whole of construction, plumbing, electricals, all kinds of basic trade jobs, that there is actually a lack of people out there, and that there are also almost certainly people who aren't academic in their natural inclination who could benefit materially from being able to skill up in some of these needed areas, and to benefit the community and themselves accordingly. So I just wondered, it seemed a bit linked in with companies, and I agree with everything that's in there, and it's all good stuff, but I just felt there was possibly an extra strand that could possibly have benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, just to come back on that, within our inclusive employment working group, we pick a two or three cohorts to focus on each year, because of within our capacity that seemed realistic.
Understood.
Last year it was around refugees and age-friendly employers and prison leavers, which we will continue to focus on. But in addition to that, this year we're trying to look at young people, because that's a growing number of benefit claimants, and people who are unemployed, and how some people are much further from employment. How do we work with them and work with employers to understand how we can match people up and create those opportunities?
Yes, I just part of my comment was that some people, we all have different learning styles, and some people's learning style isn't academic, and that they need more of a hands-on type training to develop them.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Debbie.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma, for this information. It's really valuable work that you're doing. It's very difficult for any scrutiny committee to scrutinize an update report, because there it is. It's an update on your progress, and there it is. But I wondered, and pardon my ignorance, which authority leads on this? If I look at your website, it looks like Oxford City Council. But how is it related to the functionality that used to be with the LEP, and which is now going over to the County Council? And also, how does this relate to FOP in particular? Where does the funding come from for this work?
The funding comes from all of the local authorities.
Okay, so every district is contributing, and the county are contributing to this effort.
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm employed by Oxford City Council, just as a I need to be employed by one one of them.
Yeah. So in reading the website, it said we do this and we do that, but never did it say who we are, except Baroness and the Jeremy. So
yeah, I think we are the collective of those private, public, and third sector organisations that that come together.
And so why does this come to FOP then?
I think as it originated, the idea came through the Future Oxfordshire Partnership, and then as the collective. I mean, Andrew may be able to provide more detail on that. It happened before I started, but I think it was the collective agreement that an inclusive economy partnership was needed for the county, and everyone felt there was worthwhile contributing to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take a block of three now for you, Emma. So I'll start with Alex Powell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mine was actually just that upon hearing Emma discussing the local policy lab, I realised I have a declaration of interest here and should declare that I'm an employee of Oxford Brookes University and should not participate further. But apologies, I hadn't spotted their name in there until Emma mentioned it.
Okay, all right, got it. David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the supporting refugees into employment and just report on an interesting thing in my own village where we have some Ukrainian refugees and their means of getting into work. They felt they should be contributing to our economy. And one in particular went and knocked on doors in the industrial estate and found themselves employment, which has gone down very well locally.
Excellent.
Just an observation, Chair.
Yeah, good. Nice to see you, David. It's been a long time. Nice to see you.
Yeah, and you.
Sandra.
Yes, thanks. I was thinking about the released prisoners. Are there going to be a lot more released prisoners that are coming out early? And what sort of thing can you do to help them? Because they probably haven't done half the courses that would normally be done before people are released.
Yeah, we're in quite a unique position in Oxfordshire that the Bullingdon prison is really a remand prison. So a lot of the people there are there for a very short period of time anyway. So they are really tailored in terms of the courses they offer. And they have an employment hub, and people are assessed when they go in to talk about what skills they would like to learn. The reality of how long they may have. And then tailoring their experience to fit with that. But we're working very closely with them to bring employers into that employment hub to try and match people with vacancies that are available so that when people leave the prison, they have a job to go to. And the Bullingdon prison are just starting in September, they'll be doing a new initiative called the Departure Lounge, so that when people are released, there's a space in the visitor centre they can go to, get a cup of tea, charge their phones, find out the bus timetables and the train timetables. If possible, they're going to try and source sort of mobile phones with a small amount of credit on it, so that they're able to make those phone calls to the DWP and probation. And also, hopefully, they're really hoping they'll be able to get donations of things like coats, especially people being released as homeless during the winter. That could be, a lifesaver.
Okay,
so,
that's good. James Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions actually. The first, which links, I guess, to the Oxfordshire strategic vision, but I noticed in the outcomes listed in the table on page 20 of this really helpful report, Emily. And by the way, thank you. I think the work you're doing is amazing, and I think so important that we spend time on this. But that aside, I noticed that the outcomes didn't include the kind of overarching impacts and shocks that are coming from the climate and ecological emergency. And I was wondering how the partnership could include building community adaptive capability in some way. This was sparked a bit by what Lee said, because often those kind of capabilities are not academic particularly, but they're people who are really good at building community. And that's one thing that we're clearly going to need, and it's something that seems to me that we often miss off. So just wondering about linking this back to the strategic vision and thinking about things in that way, it might be something that really works, especially when talking about inclusivity and building across the different communities that we have. So that was one observation stroke question. And then my second one was, you mentioned the celebration day, and when I was looking through the social value and procurement parts, I was wondering about whether you could share on those celebration days you may, or even with us, some examples of really good outcomes that have happened already, because people get so inspired by narratives. They could be, a bit like David was talking about, that example he gave a moment ago. They really spark people, don't they? And this report is very helpful. But what I was noticing was I really wanted some kind of human scale examples of what your work has done to make the difference to people's lives, because that really will inspire others.
Brilliant. Thank you. So in terms of linking back to communities, we definitely completely agree with that. And I think the partnership has been sort of building itself over the past year and a half in terms of what its delivery focus wants it to be. But now we're trying to really engage and build our community engagement. So we're linking in with the Community Research Network and Owned by Oxford to really start getting that sort of co-produced bottom-up approach as well, which will hopefully help us understand those opportunities that might be available within those local communities. And then in terms of social value, it's very, very apt. We completely agree that case studies and hearing from organisations and people that have already done something fantastic is much more interesting than reading something on a website or an update report. And so we are currently building a comms campaign around social value and procurement, firstly to raise awareness across the county about what social value is and how that works through procurement processes. And part of that will be case studies. And within our overall comms campaign, we will be scheduling 3 or 4 days where we are going to get a photographer to go round and collect some really fantastic images of those stories of people who have delivered fantastic initiatives, so that we can really shine a light on them and use those across our website and LinkedIn and other opportunities as well.
Thank you.
Okay. That's good. Well, thanks very much, Emma. I think in summary, I'd echo what James said, that, well, others have inferred. This is a very positive update. It's a very good piece of work. So I think we here would like to commend the work that your team has done and continues to do, and to give you, as much encouragement as we can, and we will reference that to the board meeting, because sometimes, do you know what I mean? Sometimes encouraging folk doesn't happen as much as it should. That's all, really.
Thank you very much.
Not at all. Kevin, is there anything else I need to do on that agenda item?
No, Chair, that's fine.
Okay, if I can go to the next one then, the update on the Oxfordshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy.
Yes, so we do have a couple of officers. We have Chloe Edwards, who's written the report, and I believe we also have my colleague Matt Whitney on the call.
Thank you. So hopefully you can hear me. My name is Chloe Edwards, and I'm the officer attending from Oxfordshire County Council. So for those of you who haven't met me before, I'm the project manager specifically on the local nature recovery strategy, sitting within the biodiversity and nature recovery team in Oxfordshire County Council. What I will do quickly is show you a couple of slides that relate to the project, what we've been doing, what it is, where you will have read the report as well, and then go over to questions if there are any as well. So hopefully the technology is going to allow me to share some slides. Kevin, do you know if that will work? I think it should do.
Haven't seen anything yet, but it's just coming through now. Yeah, that's better. You just need to go into presenter mode. That's all.
Lovely job. Can you see that now?
We can, yeah.
Thank you. So,
sorry, Chloe,
yeah.
just needs to go into presenter mode if you want to do it.
Okay, it is in presenter mode on my computer, so that's always the frustration when that doesn't work. But let me try again. How about if I zoom? Is that working better?
Yeah,
unfortunately,
that'll be fine. Yeah.
We'll get on. Thank you. So we are working in a partnership-led approach. So these are some of the partners that are working on the project closely and form part of the steering group within the project. This is for the local nature recovery strategy, and we have a number of different organisations who are involved in the project. So there are a number of what are called supporting authorities, and those have a particular role within LNRS legislation. Those are each of the city and district councils, as well as Natural England. Oxfordshire County Council is called the responsible authority on the local nature recovery strategy. And we then have a number of partner organisations, you can see here. We have had lots more involvement from wider audiences as well. But what we are trying to do with the local nature recovery strategy is to aim to address the severe loss of biodiversity that's been recorded in the United Kingdom. And government have asked lots of different local authority areas to create these spatial strategies, which are maps, alongside written documents, that form the strategy together, and those will outline the top priority outcomes to achieve for biodiversity across our local areas. So by biodiversity, what I mean are the animals, plants, microorganisms and fungi that make up different species within our natural environments, our wildlife. So local nature recovery strategies are expected to identify the most important outcomes that relate for biodiversity and to give suggestions on which actions, which if they were taken, could improve, create or restore habitats for species within Oxfordshire. Our LNRS, the strategy, is one of 48 strategies which DEFRA have required responsible authorities to create across England. And you can see on the map on the right, each of the areas which are expected to create local nature recovery strategies. And later on, they should cover the entire country without any gaps or overlaps. So there should be a map as well as a written list of priorities for each of these areas about achieving improvements for biodiversity. We are expected to create our priorities and actions collaboratively with people and organisations across the county, and this is a statutory requirement of the Environment Act, is in creating LNRSs. Moving on to what those draft documents are that we're currently creating. That includes a written statement of biodiversity priorities, which will be a written list of a number of different outcomes that we've created, which people and organisations in Oxfordshire feel are crucial to achieve. Outcomes could range from increasing woodland cover to creating new wetland habitats or calcareous grasslands. So they can really range in the types of habitats that we have identified as important to create and restore in the county. We then have a species priorities list, and this draft document will talk about the different types of species that have extra and special requirements relating to those individual species. And it should pick out species that are particularly important within Oxfordshire for us to focus on ensuring that we either restore or improve the situation for those species. We then have a draft description of the strategy area, and this is a narrative written document that describes Oxfordshire as our biodiversity and our nature, talks about pressures on our biodiversity, and gives people an understanding of what kinds of species or habitats can be found in different places. And that just helps people orient and understand a bit about the strategy. The final document, the fourth one, is an interactive map which will be found online in the future, and we will be giving people a consultation draft version that they can zoom in and out of. And this map is expected to take some of those areas that could become particularly important for biodiversity and species and identify where actions should be taken in the future to make those areas particularly important. It can't enforce that any of those areas are created. And what we'll be doing is intending to hold those documents on a consultation page, which we've drafted, and that will invite people to help shape the LNRS. So we put these draft consultation documents up and hear people's responses in order to change and shape our final version. For the overview of the timeline for the project, you can see that in February to March 2024, we spoke with a wide range of people about what they felt priorities for nature recovery were, specifically trying to focus on wildlife and habitats, asking people about the actions they want to see in Oxfordshire. And we held about 14 workshops where we spoke with a range of different people from different backgrounds to try and understand how they felt about these conversations and what they wanted to see. In May, we then presented back to people via an online webinar what we heard from those range of workshops, what we took from that, and how we were going to then create priorities and maps from what we'd heard, and people were able to ask questions of a panel there. We then have been doing some work in the meantime and are now creating the draft documents that I've talked about today. And in October through November, we are asking to go out for formal public consultation to invite people to comment on the documents we've created so far and tell us which bits they think we should change. Or if they just really like it, they can tell us that too. Finally, we will then take all of those into account and create the final version of this first local nature recovery strategy for Oxfordshire. These strategies are expected to be reviewed and republished in about 3 to 10 years' time at a time point at the discretion of the Secretary of State. And at that point, we would then go through this process again. We will then want to invite everyone to deliver those actions together. This is not a strategy that Oxfordshire County Council itself is able to deliver by itself. This is very much a partnership project which needs all partners, people and organisations to take hold of and use this to try and support their applications for more funding to create and improve habitats in the county. What we are currently asking of supporting authorities, which are our district and city councils, is whether they support that our draft version of our local nature recovery strategy documents can go online for public consultation. And we will be sending those documents to them in early September, looking to get those online for mid-October. And in 2025, later on, after we've amended the LNRS, we will be inviting all of those authorities again to approve and adopt the strategy. There are some things outside the scope of local nature recovery strategies which relate to things like sewage releases, house building, developments, infrastructure, creating fines, regulations or legal protections, and anything relating to green infrastructure, the creation of cycling or walking routes. These are all things that are really important still for nature recovery. We wholeheartedly support that through the LNRS, but each strategy needs to focus on the element of its legal scope that it can achieve. And for the LNRS, we're able to prioritise the habitats we can create, improve or enhance. And these elements are important, but beyond what the LNRS can do. So thank you very much for listening. Sorry my slides didn't go any bigger, but I can share them. And if you'd like to hear about the consultation, you are able to join a list to be able to hear that as well. Thank you for the time for the update there.
No, thank you. Very useful, encouraging update, I thought, anyway. David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I've got two examples where biodiversity locally is going in the wrong direction. I refer to Chelgrove Brook, which the EA calls Chelgrove River. A green slime are clearing on it, just like the River Wye, which is affecting, my late wife used to do river fine monitoring, and I know the person who's still doing it, and it's affecting a number of creatures and the trout population, which needs looking at, and I'm not quite sure how we can bring some form of regulation to stop this. And the second example, in living in the near the Children's, is the number of red kites. They've just grown so exponentially that there's not enough carrion food for them anymore. And in my own village, which used to have a population of about 300 ducks, is down to less than 50. And they've taken to actually taking not the ducks, but the ducklings. And I've seen them take the ducklings on Chelgrove Brook. So there's two examples there which needs attention where biodiversity is going in the wrong direction.
If I can make a comment on sorry, I'm Matt Whitney. I'm the local nature partnership manager employed by South and Vale on behalf of all of the councils, and supporting Chloe on this item on this agenda, but also on the LNRS more broadly. On the first issue around water quality and stuff, I think that's really important. We've seen central government come in firm stance on the water companies, and I think many people will agree that that's probably a step in the right direction. But I think it's really important to note that, as Chloe said, there's a lot of things that are important for nature and biodiversity that the LNRS does that are outside of scope for the LNRS, and I think water quality is one of them. And as for the red kites and ducklings, if one was being facetious, one might argue that that's what red kites do. However, the point is really recognised and understood, Councillor Turner, and anything to do with specific species will hopefully be picked up in the species prioritisation, and any particular management techniques for different species that aren't covered by management techniques for different habitats. So there's two ways in which those kinds of things can be addressed through LNRS, and if enough people have said that they're a priority from within the expert nature community or within the wider population, then it will be included.
Okay, thank you.
Lee?
Thank you, Chloe. It's just a check question, really. I understood the reason why you emphasised habitats and the key areas primarily, but I was just listening and looking to hear that we were planning landscape at scale and that we were looking to see wildlife movement corridors between the habitat areas so that there was a joined up network rather than isolated pockets. And I'm hoping you're going to say we're all across that already, but it was just a check question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, a very good point, and one that's been raised repeatedly through our workshops, very reassuringly as well, is the importance of connectivity between these habitats. So there's been an emphasis on ensuring that a significant amount of what we do end up mapping as those most particular important areas to achieve habitat improvement will be connected as a form of corridor or network. And we're currently working on that mapping work at the moment, so I can't tell you exactly how that will look, but that we are clear on that focus that it needs to connect, and including that north-south connectivity for climate change reasons as well.
Good. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay. I'll take a block of 3 for you now. Sandra?
Thanks. Yes, I'm just wondering whether you consider roadside verges in their contribution to biodiversity, and if so, how will you be managing them?
Yep, thank you.
Hold on, Chloe. I'll do them in 3. Otherwise,
I'm going to write them down, otherwise I forget.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that one was on verge management. Alex.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, thank you, Chloe, for the report. I completely understood the point raised in the final slide about what is not able to be considered. But I wanted to ask a question really around how that is going to be communicated to the public and communities when there is that request for consultation, because for reasons everyone will be familiar with, I imagine things like water quality are going to come up again and again in concerns, and the way in which it's communicated will be sort of really important in terms of not getting a lot of responses that ask why that isn't there. So could you just expand a bit on how the communication around it will be handled effectively?
Yeah, good question. Just had to put a big red X through a picture of a brook, I guess. John.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, mine's related very similarly to some of the other questions. I noticed that you had a great list of things that you can't deal with, most of which are in planning. And of course, you're basically saying that the nature comes second because planning comes first, especially housing and all the other things that we need to use land for. But there's a couple of bits that aren't planned that do really concern the way wildlife can move around. And you're quite right, it is important to make the corridors and not just isolated patches of land that are nature. But the major one that I'm thinking of is solar farms, which of course have security fencing all the way around them. And depending on how big the solar farm is, and you all know which one I'm going to mention, is Botley West. If that gets built with a huge amount of fencing, security fencing, no matter how much anybody says that is going to have nature in it, nothing can get through that fence apart from small creatures. And so are we planning, in a sense, are we planning correctly? In other words, for the climate emergency, the nature emergency, and the required for energy? Or are we planning for development and housing growth? This is such a huge conflict.
Yes. We'll have to have little tunnels, John, like we do for badgers and motorways. Chloe, you'd like to deal with that little package of items?
I will do my very best. Apologies if I forget in the evening. My brain stops working at 5 normally, so I'll give it my best. For the Road Verge Nature Reserve one, there is map data that we do have on existing Road Verge Nature Reserves, and they do play an important role for improving biodiversity and offering a different type of habitat that might not exist in other areas. They do need to be created in safe and suitable locations, and that's outside the scope of the LNRS to pilot. But what we can do is identify places where people have asked for those to be created or maintained, and then build that into part of our mapping. Whilst we won't map every single road verge nature reserve that could be possible, we might be able to pick out some key ones that have got a really important role in that overall picture of connectivity across the county, and say this would be a particularly good place to deliver that sort of action. We won't specify every species that could happen there or the exact time of management, because those need to be dealt with at that local level. But that's how that might look. And yes, we are considering them and looking to bring them into this process. And there seems to be a lot of support for them as well.
Could you advise the other councils how they might manage best for biodiversity?
So the role of the LNRS wouldn't be to write out exact actions for each different type of council, because I'm aware there are a lot of variations based on, for example, just the type of machinery that people have got access to. So tools and technique make a big difference. So prescribing any type of action could actually limit people from doing it properly or the way that we would ask. But it would be the case that the goal would be to improve biodiversity on those road verge nature reserves in a positive way. And we would identify particular locations ideally as well to do that. But we wouldn't go down to working at each council level. However, there are other officers that can support that type of work within county council.
I wasn't thinking of being too specific, but general ideas for helping biodiversity. And do you have any figures about the differences between your nature reserves on the roadside verge and other verges?
Sure. We are looking to create those general measures, so general ideas on how that type of environment could be created and managed. So that would be available to everybody to be able to use. And I don't have existing numbers related to the project on the variation of species within each, but I'm aware that that exists.
Oh, can I call you some other time to get that information from you?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. So I want to touch on the water quality one. This is a really important, divisive and just important one, because this was voiced as the top priority from people across Oxfordshire responding to our consultation, and it was repeatedly one of the highest priority outcomes to achieve in the county. And when people were asked about whether that was related to media or recent news and events, people responded saying they didn't feel that that was the case. It was just something that felt important to them. What we can do is look to create habitats and environments and habitat work, so that can involve maintenance work or the creation of habitats that could lead to improved water quality. We can do that through the LNRS. We are looking to do that. We do want to contribute towards that priority of improving freshwater habitats and water quality. What we can't do is change sewage treatment works, advise Thames Water on what and how they do things in the area, or prevent sewage. We can't stop people creating sewage or influence the infrastructure around that. What we can do is the habitat side of focusing on important areas where we could focus for actions to achieve clean water. I hope that that helps somewhat with explaining what LNRS can and can't do. And in terms of the communications, we are aware that it's really important to try and get that messaging right when we're speaking with people to explain the scope of the strategy. That is a national problem because these strategies are being created across the country. And so this is the first time they have been created. We need to be sensitive to that and help people understand what we can do. My intention is through our consultation point to have those sorts of FAQs on the consultation page so people can access those. But also we've been attending events to try and explain this to people. We've been going through parish councils as well as those workshops we've held. And I'm trying to make that as clear as possible, but I'm happy to take suggestions as well.
Shall I have a go at the third question, Chloe, which was around planning?
Yeah, on planning. Thank you, Matt.
So there was a comment that nature comes second to planning. We, the LNP, have lobbied central government quite hard for stronger wording than local plans should have regard for the LNRS. No stronger wording was forthcoming from the previous government. Over the weekend, there was a letter published by Angela Rayner and Steve Reed. So that's the Cabinet Member for Housing and Local Government and the Cabinet Member for DEFRA. It was a joint letter from them saying we are thinking about planning and environment in the joined up way. So that's really good to hear. So the LNRS can't dictate what weight the LNRS has in the planning system, and that is for each individual district councils and city councils, local plan processes to decide, based on the new MPPF that we're bound to have in October or November, the extent to which they can prioritise nature and delivery of LNRS within those documents. So sorry, that's a bit of an obfuscatory answer, but that's not within our gift to fix. And there was a comment about Botley West as well. I think, again, as Chloe has pointed out, what's in scope, what's outside of scope, the LNRS can't comment on specific planning applications or specific projects like that. But the LNP has been responding to each of the stages of the consultation for Botley West and asking pertinent questions such as about the fence. So we all have bated breath.
Thanks for that, Matt. I have to say, I've had sight of loads of letters in the last week from ministers to different people. You know what I mean? It's been like a production line. Well, why it should be, I guess, shouldn't it? But not the one you just mentioned. So it would be helpful, probably, Kevin, if a copy of the letter from ministers quoted could be circulated to members of the scrutiny panel, just in case, like me, they haven't seen that particular one. And that, I think that would be helpful to members. Well, it won't be unhelpful anyway.
No problem. Sure, Matt can forward it.
I think you're absolutely right about waiting with bated breath for a revised LPF. And yeah, who knows the secret of the black magic box? Not me. It will be good to watch. So I've got two more contributions on this subject, and then I'm going to wrap it up. So James, followed by Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Follows very much that conversation, and it's very encouraging to hear what you've just said, Matt. I guess I had a question for all of us, building on what John has said, and our first outcome of the strategic vision is that our natural environment will be in a better state than when we found it. So I'm really interested in that juxtaposition with the planning legislation. So I'm wondering what each of us can do in terms of how we can really push that, if that's something we believe in, for the FOP vision and everything, how we can really push that. We've got a joint local plan that's being developed at the moment in Southern Vale. So I guess I'm looking for ideas from others as well as from Chloe and Matt, because it strikes me that if we don't look after that, those houses aren't really worth very much anyway, and our lives won't be very good in the next few years. So any ideas would be really welcome. Thank you.
I would just say all of the councils have really excellent officers working at the juxtaposition of planning and nature. They are all closely tuned into the LNRS process, and one presumes closely tuned into the local plan drafting and process as well. So hopefully are well placed to make that happen.
Thanks, Matt. I guess can I just follow up, Chair, just for a second?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I guess you got me thinking that the houses, us, all depend on the environment. So how can we help more people realise that each time we're speaking, so that actually, we perhaps have a day when LNRS and things like that actually do determine a lot of planning policy, because no point in having houses that are flooded, etc., etc. So thank you.
Yeah, if I knew the answer to that, James, I'd tell you. It will be interesting to see also what becomes of what planning officers refer to as the standard method for calculating house numbers. That will be a novelty. Alex, did you have your go, or have I still got you to listen?
It was just a very quick follow-up, if that would be okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Which is firstly to say thank you to Chloe and Matt for your response there. I think it really brings home that important point about the sort of importance of explaining exactly what can and can't be considered under the LNRS. That for residents, actually water quality was their top concern. But I guess I just wanted to flag there, I think that's what makes the communications all the more important, because this is obviously incredibly important. But if we want that public buy-in, then making clear why that top concern is not being considered is of really, really fundamental importance, because ultimately I'm sure we all do want the public to be buying into that. But if they are having a sense that actually they keep telling people this is their concern, and then that's not at the center of the LNRS, then there's that concern that you won't get that buy-in. So I guess it was firstly just to flag that, and secondly, in terms of suggestions, I think what you've mentioned about sort of going into parish councils and speaking to people is probably by far the best way. And I think if as much as there's capacity to do that, I would really encourage that, getting that face-to-face correspondence, because I think often FAQs, these sorts of things, they rely on respondents being incredibly motivated to read all of the documentation, and people are very busy. People don't always get time to do that. So that face-to-face interaction, wherever it's possible, it just sounds like a really good idea, and I just thought it was worth specifically knowing that that's a really good approach.
Thank you. I'd like to point out that alongside that, we're also trying to do a similar thing with some of the catchment partnerships across Oxfordshire, focusing on water quality and catchments, as well as the farm clusters as well. There's a certain limited amount of resources in. I do my best to get to those events and meetings. But yeah, I think we need to continue pushing that this is an important strategy that can influence that and what it can do. So yeah, thank you for the suggestions.
No, not at all. Thank you. We're grateful for the contributions and the update on this, and we will, I think, Kevin, relay a message of encouragement to the board.
Thank you.
If I can go on then to I'm conscious of the time here, folks, and it's running away from me. And we've got item 10, arguably the most important matter on the agenda, although I'm loath to say that. But still to come. So I need to crack on, is what I'm saying, in a roundabout long way, counterproductively. So number 8 is the advisory group updates. Kevin, are you and Andrew going to just whistle through those for us?
Well, thanks, Chair. I mean, there isn't really anything to say other than they're presented, for information and transparency. Some of the officers, specific officers, would be on the call, but we, more than willing to take any questions back, although they probably have to be, done outside of the meeting.
Yeah, I think they're kind of like, it's yesterday's news in a way.
It is a bit yesterday's news, although I guess with the infrastructure ones, it would, just in terms of the journey that the local area energy planning stuff has been through. It's been part of that journey is going through the infrastructure advisory group, which I'm sure Mark Saunders is on the call, we refer to anyway. But yeah, that's the pretty much, just for information as but I'm very happy to take questions back if we can't answer them.
Okay, so these are very much for information. I see one hand. Charlie.
Thanks, Barry. Just noting that item 117 on page 34, in terms of the updates, has very little, so the net zero route map, which just makes me wonder, is that a sort of part of the system that's not working?
Chair, if I can come back to that, it's the net zero route map and action plan update is a sort of monitoring report that goes to the infrastructure advisory group and the environment advisory group, and it's not that it's been ignored in their consideration. It's just that it is quite a brief item. It's quite factual.
Okay, no more hands up on this agenda item, so we'll receive those 2 reports and go on to consideration of the work programme. Do you want to introduce this, Kevin?
Yes, so I can see Emily wants to come in, so I don't know if Emily wants to speak first or
no, you go.
Okay, well, just to be brief then, it's no surprise that the items on the forward programme, scrutiny work programme, reflect those of the FOP itself. I don't want to talk too much about it now, but there is the FOP review process that's going ahead. That will inevitably impact on the work of this panel, because the major job of the panel is to scrutinise what the FOP's doing. Yeah, that's my only specific comment, but I'll try and address any questions.
Okay, Emily.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Sorry, I'm struggling with the buttons on my phone.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just one of my questions was going to be, is the review of the LEP coming back to this panel to consider when I know it's come through. I didn't know if it was coming back and whether it should be on the work programme. I had another question, which was today we were supposed to have the Local Enterprise Partnership Transition Memorandum of Understanding. That was on the work programme for today, but we haven't had it. So I just wondered if we could have an update on what's going on with that. And then the other thing was more of a sort of something for the new chair to consider, and the rest of the panel as well, I think, in terms of the agendas. So obviously we've had a lot of things that are to updates to hear today, and it's been really we've heard about some really great work that's going on, but I'm a bit concerned that we haven't really had the opportunity to sort of what's the word, to really scrutinise those things, because they're updates. And in terms of making recommendations to the board, when it's a paper to note or to just an update, then we don't really have the opportunity so much to sort of add any value. So I suppose it's a request that when we're setting the agendas for future, if we could make sure that the ones that actually have sort of decisions that the FOP are going to be asked to do, so for example, the item 10, whether those can go higher up on the agenda, and then information, things that are updates are kind of afterwards, so that we're fresh and able to, add as much value as we can to the process.
The short answer is you're ahead of me, Emily. But yes, I will see to it that we do it the other way around. Yes.
Chair, if I just perhaps respond to Emily's questions about the LEP MOU and so on. So there is a draft memorandum of understanding, and yes, Emily's right that the intention was for that to go forward to the FOP meeting next week. As it's turned out, not all the partners are ready to agree it yet, and therefore the authors chose to withdraw it from the FOP meeting next week, and therefore from tonight's meeting. So that remains a work in progress. The transition work scheduled to run from April through to September, and I'm getting a sense that by the time the MOU is ready, the transition work will have been done, and so history may overtake us. I'm expecting that something on LEP transition will come forward to FOP, but ultimately that will be a question for the County Council to decide, because they are the ones who have ownership of that process.
Okay, well, that's suddenly more interesting than it was now, Andrew.
Oh dear, I'll start again.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Just that you can't help but wonder. All right, so what wasn't agreed and why then? But anyway, let's not. That might take half an hour. Charlie.
Yes, thanks. Just speaking up for the officers who put together the agenda, which is that because we have to go offline for the item 10, that's why it was put at the back, but usually the substantive stuff would be put at the top. But I agree very much that these meetings could be more valuable, and I would vote for just having updates written even, and then if we want to have more specific deep dives, then we can request that explicitly. But I think it would be more valuable use of our time just that we just had written updates, and then we just only talk about substantive things. Talking of substantive things, for the next meeting, I think we should talk about devolution, given the requests that gone out from Angela Rayner, and given that council leaders have been invited to talk, council leaders are also on the FOP. So that, and then also the future of the FOP, if it sounds like it may well be changing off the back of whatever meetings happen from the FOP. And I have heard from multiple places that it sort of feels like it's sort of, you know, it exists because there's fund is coming to a close. There's also devolution going on. So will it, you know, what formats are going to take in the future? I mean, those seem to be the two most pressing questions for us to scrutinise.
Yes, you're not wrong. Andrew, are you able to facilitate that on our work programme?
Yes, and I think officers would be completely in agreement that those are big topics that should be discussed. I mean, clearly a lot depends on what the future shape of FOP looks like, but it would need to be a conversation to have here. Yes.
It's just that there may be, it's one of those things that I sometimes wonder, sometimes there is value in scrutiny committees, scrutiny panels, scrutinizing a topic before it is decided, not after.
Indeed. And Barry, I think you were not on this panel when there was a conversation a meeting or two ago about reviewing the effectiveness and the way that this panel functions. And we concluded that very much needs to be built into the thinking as FOP is redesigned and not left as an afterthought. So yes, I think agreeing with you.
Yeah, no, my concern is with in terms of, you know, with the FOP and what about devolution, which those two things, you know, maybe meld into the same bit of space in a way. And whether there would be value in this scrutiny panel talking about that subject in advance of a FOP level decision. In other words, give advice to the FOP on what it thought in advance.
Yeah, so I mean, if I can suggest to you that the usual practice after a scrutiny panel meeting is for some feedback to be given by the scrutiny panel chair to the FOP meeting, as you will recall from your time as a member of FOP, that would seem like a point to be made as part of that feedback.
Okay. No, good point. Yeah, okay, I'll do that then.
Yeah,
thank you. Lee.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of follow-up points, really, to trenchantly support the point that I think that what goes on with the LET after transition should be coming here. I do think that the districts have a real interest in these issues, and I don't want to see a suggestion that the economic development and all of that is the sole purview of county. And I say that as somebody who's supportive of the concept of an industrial strategy with regional rebalancing and all the rest of it. But I do think that it's got to be bottom up as well as looking at trying to put together a national mosaic and a county one. So very much in favour of that, and very much in favour of devolution down from county level. So we'll see how we all interpret devolution, but I do think that's going to be a very big debate, and I think we need to get powers as close to local people as is practicable. So yes, I would support those two things going on the agenda.
Yeah, okay, good. And I look forward to seeing your name on a ballot paper for a directly elected mayor very soon then, Lee.
I don't think we're quite on the same wavelength there, Barry.
Okay, good. James.
Thank you. I think FOP has an environment advisory group, doesn't it? And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to bring that the workings from them to this scrutiny panel. If there's things we can scrutinise there, I'm particularly thinking about climate change adaptation. Again, given we're future oriented and thinking about, I think County has recently commissioned a report on current and future climate vulnerability. So I wonder if the things like that we can bring and look at the impact those things will have on the future of Oxfordshire, basically. And I just noted that in the infrastructure advisory group item that came through before, there was a thing about water supply security. So I'm thinking there's a whole piece around, infrastructure and climate adaptation that might be quite helpful for us to look at if that's within our purview. Thank you.
Okay. All of the FOP advisory groups, I don't know, there's 4 or 5 of them from memory. They all meet or should meet on a cyclical thing in line with the meetings of the partnership. They should all meet once a cycle, should do. And what their updates, their advice comes here. It does come here. It's just that there haven't been any meetings, so we haven't got any this time.
Right. I just didn't notice it going forward. That was all. So hence my asking.
I see your point. Yeah. I haven't gone off script there, have I, Kevin? I just check.
No, that's correct, Chair.
Okay. It has been known, as you know, for me to go off a script. So unless there's anything else on the work programme, sufficient advice for officers on that? Yes. So we can go then to item 10, the local area energy plan and the outline business case. Do we need to go to confidential setting or anything like that, or only if it becomes necessary?
Only if it becomes necessary, Chair. That's why there is sort of specific appendix which was included in members' packs, which wasn't published.
So if anyone wants to dive into the confidential appendix, you'll have to signal, and we'll have to go out of being recorded and then come back, or something like that. Anyway, but if we stay with what is in the public domain first, and who's going to lead on this?
Hopefully we've got Mark Saunders are still on the call.
Yes, I'm here, Kevin.
Good, we can hear you. Thank you.
Good. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. I've got a few slides just to introduce the concept of local energy planning and some of the background. So bear with me. Right, is that in presenter mode?
It is, yeah.
Great, okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's been a while getting to this point, but I'm pleased we're at this point. So I just want to quickly take you through the background, I guess, to local energy planning, and the background specifically in Oxfordshire's case. I just want to start very quickly with a real sort of top-level view of our energy system. So in the past, we had very much a linear system of energy being produced at one end and consumed at another, and a pretty straight pathway between them. What we've got now, and what we're tending to we'll move to in the future, is a really complicated system of large intermittent energy producers, a big transmission network, a large distribution network, and then a really complicated mix of storage, batteries, generation, consumption at the local level. And I've put a blue box around what that is at the local level, the distribution level, and that is the area that local energy plans encompass. So they don't go up to the transmission level, they stay firmly rooted in the distribution level. And also, I just wanted to quickly show you how complicated the future energy mix is going to be. So this is an estimated energy mix in 2050 based on the sort of best case scenario of leading the way. And you'll see there's an awful lot of wind, there's an awful lot of onshore wind, and there's an awful lot of solar, and a lot of those things are intermittent. If you add that to the fact that we live in a growing part of the world, our economy, our population in Oxfordshire grows about 4% a year. We have a growing economy, lots of large industrial users who need electricity. We've got lots of planned rollout of things like heat pumps and electric vehicles in order to meet our net zero commitments. So all of these things combined mean that we have to have a fairly complicated plan of how we're going to reach net zero, how we're going to provide the energy, the capacity to enable our economy to grow, enable everyone to have the electricity and the energy that they need. So just very quickly to recap on how we've got to this point. Some of you will recall that a couple of years ago, there was a report called the Net Zero Roadmap and Action Plan, which was actually came out last year. It was actually produced by FOP, and in the Net Zero Roadmap and Action Plan, which was a follow-up to something called the Pathways to Zero Carbon Oxfordshire, the Net Zero Roadmap and Action Plan set out what could be described as a sort of broad brush view of how we're going to achieve net zero in the county by 2050. And it looked at different pathways, and it actually recommended in that report that Oxfordshire needed to establish local air energy plans and local air energy plan functions. So back in September last year, a governance structure was actually set up underneath the Infrastructure Advisory Group, and that governance structure included an officer-led working group and a steering board led by which comprised the senior officers and actually is chaired by Andrew Down, who's on this call. That working group has been, that governance structure, I should say, has been in operation since September last year. And through that time, it has established a scope for the local air energy plans that would be undertaken in the county. And as part of that scope is two key aspects. One of them is that we want to procure local air energy plans. And the other one is that we want to be able to develop our own capabilities within district councils and the county council to be able to do this ourselves in the future. Obviously, the procurement of plans is an expensive exercise, but there are the tools becoming available that will enable us to be able to do this ourselves in the coming years, but we need to be able to develop that function in-house. So we essentially have two strands to this exercise. And our thinking of that was essentially sharpened via a process of early market engagement that we conducted with some of the main consultants back in January and February of this year, which enabled us to sort of come to a fairly firm view of what we wanted to do within the county. And that comprised a delivery model, which I'll come up to in a minute. But in a sense, that also gave us a clear understanding that the initial budget that had been set aside for this work of £150,000 was not going to be sufficient to procure the plans we needed and also to develop the embedded function so that we could continue to do this planning work ourselves into the future. So off the back of that, the outline business plan was, sorry, the outline, yes, the outline business plan was produced, and that has gone through a series of challenges, both within the governance structure that I've just mentioned, but also at the Infrastructure Advisory Group, also at the Executive Officer Group and through the Chief Executives. So it essentially brings us here today. So local energy plans themselves are essentially what is now a fairly well understood 7-step process in terms of gathering data, engaging with stakeholders, mapping and then modeling what kind of scenario, what kind of target date you want for your net zero achievement, and then choosing and identifying a range of projects which will enable you to get to your stated goal in the most cost-effective way. And all this is done in a spatial way, so it's an area-based, place-based mechanism. And what we're planning to achieve with the rollout of local energy plans in Oxfordshire is that they'll also be digital, so that we'll be able to have these plans. There'll be geospatial plans viewable on a GIS system, so that people can actually see what the plans look like on the ground. And the local energy plan is in effect a master plan for the energy transition. So it looks at the energy system as a whole, and not just the bits that you see, the pylons and the substations, but also the aspects of energy planning that you wouldn't necessarily think of. So energy efficiency, retrofit, all those things relate and would be encompassed in a local energy plan. As I mentioned before, it comprises of two parts. One is the actual local energy plans themselves, and the other is this functional development that I've already mentioned. So very quickly, this is the model that we propose to implement. It's essentially a three-stage model. So the first stage is looking at modeling across the county. So looking at, and this is one of the ways in which we hopefully going to achieve some efficiency by modeling across the county, looking at all of the data at a county-wide scale first, and then at phase 2, moving to district level local energy plans, where the districts will actually client the plans themselves. So the overall process is cliented by the county council as the convener of this process, but phase 2 will enable the district councils to essentially shape and client their own plan that's specific to their own locality. And then after the production of the plans, there's essentially we're hoping that we can move quickly into delivery by incentivizing the consultants to minimize delivery gaps, so that we can have either some way of having pre-feasibility or some kind of investment portfolio approach that enables us to move to delivery as quickly as possible. Because what we don't want is to have the plans produced and then to spend 2 or 3 years working out how they need to be implemented. We need to be able to move to implementation very quickly. So the outline business case itself puts forward 4 options, and I'll very quickly summarize those here. So option 1 is that we actually don't do anything. We actually disband the process as it currently stands. We don't spend any money, not even the £150,000 that has been allocated to date, and that we essentially leave the development of local energy plans to the district councils to pursue at their own ends. Option 2 is to just look at convening the functional part of the LEAP work only, and that would effectively mean using the £150,000 to do that piece of work. Option 3 looks at delivering the strategic level plan only. So that's the sort of first part, looking at the county-wide overview. And as part of the early market engagement process, it was understood fairly early on that that was probably going to cost something in the order of £300,000 to £400,000. So obviously more than 150 that has already been allocated, but that still wouldn't enable us to have a full dynamic district level suite of local energy plans that cover the whole county. And obviously option 4, which is what we've described here, is the full OXLEAP program. So that's 5 district level local energy plans, some kind of county-wide overview, and then alongside that the development of the LEAP function. And that requires, your officers estimate, a budget of about £600,000. So the benefits of doing this piece of work, well, clearly it enables us to have a planned decarbonisation to meet our net zero targets. And obviously the different district councils have different targets. So having different district level LEAPs will enable the councils to essentially shape their own platform. It enables us to be able to share information with the district network operators, the energy companies, to enable them to much more proactively and efficiently target their investment programs so that it meets our own objectives. It also means that we can have a proper, effective planning system integration. So what local energy planning isn't is not some kind of get out of jail free card that you can use to supplant the planning system. All of the projects that will be implemented off the back of local energy plans have to be implemented in conjunction with the planning system and through the planning system. Local energy plans also enable us to have a local mandate to ensure that we get social value out of the work that happens to transform our energy system. It also means that we've got a governance structure in place to make sure that happens. And local energy planning also enables a route way through community and stakeholder engagement. And very quickly, in order for this to happen, the district councils will need to commit some resource to make this happen at the various stages of the programme. And this has obviously been a key concern of the district councils, and it's a major part of the outline business case, is looking at how do we mitigate the impact of this extra resource requirement, which amounts to about 140 days over the 2-year period of the planning process. So in order to do that, what we've agreed is there'll be a number of mitigations. One is that the procurement will have a number of stage gates in it, so that will enable the district councils to either exit the process if they choose to, or to move at a different pace. So they could essentially step out of the process at the stage gate and then step back in, hopefully when they feel it's the right time for them. Obviously, the county council has a team dedicated to making sure this happens, and we will do all we can at the county council to support the districts in clienting this when that clienting role falls to the districts in phase 2. We're looking for extra funds, and we're also looking to delegate some aspects to third parties if that's appropriate. And there's also the idea that we could actually reduce some of the involvement of the districts in the co-creation of the LEAP function, but that clearly has impacts in terms of the overall sort of long-term effectiveness of that LEAP function. I'm going to stop there. And hand over back to the chair.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Very useful apposite synopsis. So I'll start with Ali.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I read this starting off with extreme skepticism, and I have to say the paper was very good and did go through all of the arguments, and I thought it was well written, and I did engage with it, and I do understand the issue. For me, I'm still thinking that there's a role for a national grid, that this issue needs to be well done across the entire country, and the fact that there's multiple sources of generation doesn't make it less important to me. It actually makes it more important. To me, when it's done in that kind of a way, the cost is also recovered directly through the cost of energy, and we seem to have a program here that's going to cost us 600 grand and then an ongoing very heavy cost, and I'm not clear where that gets recovered. I do see the arguments for improving the efficiency of investment and everything else, and I completely get that, but I'm skeptical of whether really local government are going to get funded by government to do this on an ongoing basis. So I think there's a fundamental national discussion that needs to be had there. I thought that we should simplify the thing a lot. I mean, you said, Mark, that don't worry about nuclear, don't worry about offshore wind, that's not part of this. Well, actually, of course, and I'm sure you would say this too, we need to know what that flow is coming into our network, because that shapes part of what everything else has to chip in to make the overall generation work. So it does have to be joined up. And for me, I want to see the base energy system network now, with its capacity, with its network, and with its spare capacity headroom. And then I want us to plan out an expected situation, and I'll call it 2050, because I think that's a pretty good date. But by 2050, taking account of all the adaptations and changes away from fossil fuels that we know about, the EVs, the domestic heating, the extent to which domestic retrofitting and insulation has taken place, industry, commercial, public sector, exactly how we do this, the nodes and where we put storage in the system makes a dramatic difference to how much island capacity we might need. And if we put the storage in the right places, in the right nodes, we can actually minimize that extent of both investment cost and also the issues that it has for the countryside. So there's a lot to think through there, I think. And obviously, there'll be a lot of issues about mixing use of overnight base load, demand shift in time, whether it's charging EV overnight and all that sort of thing, and filling storage when we've got free energy that doesn't have an immediate use to go into storage, so that when we need it can be taken off. But in between those 2 points, in between now and 2050, we have got a massive degree of adaptation. And I think one of the things that brings me round to having some support for this, from where I started, was saying this degree of adaptation is so huge that we can't entirely walk away and leave it to the national grid, even though I think there has to be such an organisation to put it all together. And one of the more complex things is all about timing and how domestic households decide or don't decide on what they're going to do about how they're going to heat their home and how they're going to insulate. And we know that they'll be pushed a bit along the way, probably, and they'll be told that their gas boiler can't be renewed, and there's a point at which they have to take some decisions. But given the costs involved, it may be that some are reticent to doing retrofits and things. And so the timing between here and 2050, I think by 2050 we can think that's probably all been done. But how quickly it happens along the way, that's going to be more difficult. And of course, if they lose their fossil fuel heating before they've done the insulation and all the rest of it, then their electricity demand and their energy demand is going to be the greater. So shaping and scoping that extra capacity as it comes on stream, that's pretty damn tricky. And how we bring that all into play. So I thought this was a fabulous paper. It's absolutely a subject that we need to engage with. I'm just a little bit unsure about going for the full 600 grand and ongoing cost and taking it on as a function of local government. I'm just not entirely sure that is the case. And the point's been made about planning. And of course, we have to plan for generation. We have to plan for things like pylons. We have to plan all that stuff. But don't forget, when it comes to housing, when it comes to the domestic market, we're normally planning for that little bit of new homes. In this scenario, we're actually planning for what happens to existing homes. And that's bloody complicated because we don't have all the levers, do we, that can control. We're going to have this street retrofitted in 2026, and that one's going in 2027. It's not something we have command and control over like that. And it's going to be quite complicated, I think. So,
okay.
Just food for thought.
Yeah, plenty of it. Okay. Mark, I'm going to take some contributions, and then you can come back. So I'll go next to Charlie.
Thanks, Barry. One question is, so I'm actually unclear on, in terms of content, what is and isn't in the confidential bits, because I thought I had assumed some of the money stuff was in the confidential bits, but we're allowed to. I'll just carry on. The 600k piece, well, the 500k to consultants is a little bit of a sort of is that a sorry, I'm going to talk about that. Is a bit of a sort of a eyebrow raiser. If there is the demand, if there's the want to bring this stuff in-house and to do this and to build the capacity in-house, which I support, why would you not start that process earlier and say get the consultants to do one of the 5 and then build in the capacity during the first one and then do the next 4 yourself? Why, like, what will the in-house capacity be doing once all the plans are made? And why wouldn't, so is that not another option that you could explore? But broadly speaking, you know, I think this is really important and be happy to support this going forward. The other question I have is about where do the final revenues come to? We know that there's much greater support amongst local communities if the benefits of energy production turn back into investment within the local area. Is that part of these plans? Is that part of the scope of this work?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, arguably, if it's not, it should be. Next one is John, and then Emily.
Thank you, Chairman. It was interesting, a very interesting report, and thank you very much for putting it together. This is one subject I was really looking forward to getting my teeth into, and I note from the time I haven't got 3 hours to talk to you about it. But
that is the correct answer, by the way. Yes.
But I'll just run over a couple of things which are very apparent. One, you kind of edged some of it, particularly with your diagram about the separating of energy. It's no longer a giant power station somewhere driving the national grid, and we all take off the power. Life is changed considerably. We can all generate our own power, and this point, trying to generate at point of use, has to be much better than trying to generate massive amount of energy somewhere and then deliver it to point of use, because that does need a massive grid, and it needs a big upgrade on the grid. If you can generate energy at point of use, and what I'm talking about the obvious way is rooftop solar. Now, rooftop solar allows, especially with battery storage, allows all new houses, all new employment to generate at point of use and store its own energy. That reduces the demand on the grid. So that automatically means you haven't got so much of a problem. Ooh, that rings a bell. That automatically means that your problems of demand have changed considerably, which is sort of what you showed in that diagram earlier on. But two things need to happen, obviously. One is all the local plans have to insist on anything new, any building that's brand new, and indeed any car park that already exists, must have solar panels. No arguments, it must have solar panels. Ideally with battery storage, because of the other problem that you mentioned, which is intermittency. Now, the only things that I always try and put on renewable energy is the word reliable in front of it, which seems to be forgotten when everybody wants to build a giant solar farm. Giant solar farm doesn't put energy where it's wanted. It puts it in the grid. So why put all those panels out on a field when you could put them on all the houses and put them on all these warehouses we've got around? You can get the same area, same energy generation, but at the point of use, not out in a field somewhere and then have to build a national grid. Just the most obvious reliable one that I know of is tidal energy that everybody forgets. As long as the moon keeps going around the earth, we've got massive tides, masses of energy that is not being captured, but that doesn't apply to us in Oxford, obviously. I noticed on one of your charts on page 123, you have gas mentioned all the way down. Shouldn't that be deleted? The idea is 2025, no more gas. Forget it. Whatever you're going to build that's brand new doesn't have gas. There are better ways of doing it without producing carbon. So there's lots of things to do with the planning and the future that we need to do now. And then, of course, exactly as Councillor Rawlins mentioned, the other aspect that is really important is retrofitting. Now, that is much more of a challenge and much more difficult, because that's trying to deal with existing things. And so that's up to whether anybody like myself wants to spend the money, as I have done, on solar panels and battery storage. But, I wanted to do that. Lots of people either can't afford to or they don't want to for some strange reason, because having done it is magic. I haven't paid an electricity bill for the last 3 months. But,
okay.
It's just all this balancing of the grid, which is exactly what you started by saying, but it's how it's done.
Yes. Okay. Good. So, Emily?
Thank you. I've got a few points. It's more about the actual decision that we're scrutinising, or looking for recommendations towards the panel. Sorry, not the panel, the FOP partnership when they meet next week. I had a question, a couple of points for Mark, and I had a question which might be for Andrews. It's a procedural question. So in terms of the actual whether all of the FOP partners should agree this, I suppose two of my biggest concerns, you've touched on a bit already, Mark, around funding, but it's also not just about money, it's about officer capacity. And, you know, councils, particularly district councils, are so lean. And it's like, so it's not just about the funding, it's about actually having the people and the space to be able to do this amongst lots of other priorities. And not saying it isn't important at all, but it's about how do we make sure that we've got that capacity in the system. The other thing is around whether this is going to impact on the timelines of local plans, because obviously each of the councils are at different stages. I know that in South and Vale, our joint local plan, we're on a very tight time frame, and I wouldn't want this to slow that down. So those are two things that, if we were making recommendations, Chair, those are two things that I would ask the committee to consider: impacts on local plans and officer capacity. My question for potentially Andrew, if you are the right person, is about this actual decision. So the recommendation is the recommendation to ask for the funding, or because the FOP can't make a decision about how councils spend their money. So could you just clarify exactly what the FOP is going to be deciding? So just and how that works, because we're always told FOP doesn't make decisions, but then this is kind of committing councils to spending money.
So it's not directly committing councils to spending money, because the funding that is being sought is from the residue of the Housing and Growth Deal Capacity Fund. So that's money that we already have and is held by the county council as the accountable body, but on behalf of the Future Oxfordshire Partnership. So it's to spend money that we've already got. There is obviously some request on district resource, which Mark mentioned, the 140 odd days or whatever it is over a couple of years. So I mean, there is a bit of a commitment in terms of support in kind, but not in terms of cash. On the local plan point, Emily, I have spoken myself to the monitoring officer at South and Vale, and I think her view was that this shouldn't interfere with the local plan process, but that's obviously a decision for each individual district to weigh up.
Is that okay, Emily? Is that clear?
Yes, it is. Thank you. I just don't think that if we're going to make some recommendations, it needs to be focused on the decision rather than the sort of content of the report. So I was just going to focus back on that.
Yeah. Okay. James?
Thank you. I guess first I'd just reinforce Charlie's point about building capacity in-house for subsequent LEPs after the first has been consultant-led or tapering down. And that said, I guess I'd also then think about what Emily's just said in terms of the concerns over officer capacity. And I just wanted to check one other thing with you, Mark. Did I hear you right say that retrofit is included as part of this this work? Given yeah, it is brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, Emily, did you want to come back? Maybe not. Okay. Mark, variations on a theme there. Are you able to wrap those up for us?
I will do my best, Chair. I wrote them down as we were going through. So yeah, so just to address Councillor Rawlins' point about shouldn't this be done by what is in effect now something called the Regional Electricity System Planner, and it's a new function that's been set up by the government. So that looks at regional energy strategy, I guess you could call it. They won't be producing plans at the local level. They'll be looking at regional energy strategy and how it sort of all fits together. And there'll be 13 RESPs, as they're called, across the country. The work that we do in Oxfordshire will feed into RESP's decisions about how they decide or how they ensure that overall network investment across the whole network meets the various needs, the various decarbonisation needs of the different regions. So in a way,
so Mark, these new guys, are they going to have the statutory responsibility for adequate energy delivery?
The RESP won't have the statutory responsibility. That will still sit with national grid energy transmission and the distribution network operators. So your Scottish and Southerns and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But the rest will have the responsibility for the I guess the planning, the overall planning of the energy system at that regional scale. But that still means that there's an opportunity for us to shape our own energy system within Oxfordshire and how we want it to deliver for us. And that will be things like you said, like balancing, like how much retrofit do we have? Where is it going to happen? At what time is it going to happen? How's it going to be paid for? All those things will be encompassed in the local air energy plan. Just going
how would
forward,
you see that happening, Mark? How would we control retrofit and when freeholders decide to do that to their house?
So what the plans will do is if effectively off the back of a local air energy plan, there will be a project pipeline. So there'll be a long list of projects which in their sum will equal up to what we need to reach our decarbonisation target. But not only that, we've got to weigh that against economic growth opportunities, employment opportunities. So they'll all be sort of they'll all go into the sort of sausage machine that is a local air energy plan.
Yeah, I mean, for example, if the government intervened and the government said you shall not convey your house unless it meets this energy standard, that would be something that would force an evolutionary change through the system.
Sure. And what the plans, so the other thing to remember is that a local air energy plan isn't a one-off thing. They'll need to be redone every 2 or 3 years because obviously the landscape changes, policy changes, planning changes, projects will be implemented. So, we'll sort of reach further towards our targets. So, the landscape behind the plans changes. But in answer to your point about projects and who does them, well, obviously the project pipeline will in effect list out a long list of costed projects. And then there's a decision, I guess, through the district councils working together with the county and the various partners we have about how do they get implemented. Are they done by the councils through grant funding? Are they commercialised? Are they handed to the private sector? How much are we prepared to give away? I guess how much risk are we prepared to take on ourselves? All those decisions are, I suppose, still to come in terms of implementation. But what the plans will do is tell us what needs to happen, but they won't tell us who needs to do it. There'll be I guess that's the bit about the delivery gap and how do we understand the implementation of those projects. Where does the money come from? The investment strategies that have to sit beside it, the business models.
If we create a solar farm, presumably you would expect us to make the connection, Mark. But if it was somebody else, you wouldn't expect us to do the connection.
I think Lee, what I need to avoid is a two-way.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, it's just to understand and share the.
Yeah, I'm sure Mark would enjoy a 4-hour-long phone call with you.
Big subject.
Go on, Mark.
Thank you. So if I just go to Councillor Hicks' point about why are we spending all this money up front to deliver plans when we could just take a very small piece and deliver it and then work out how we did the sort of in-house capacity but as we went. I think the answer to that is we really need to have the plans all done in one piece to get the strategic overview, to get the full understanding. I think the danger is if you do one plan for Oxford City, arguably first, and then it takes you another 5 years to develop the plans for the rest of the county. Oxford City tears on ahead because it's got its local energy plan, and everyone else can't because they don't have the plans in place. I think we need to be able to deliver the plans in concert and use that 12-18-month period to develop the understanding around our leap function that hopefully will be long-term part of what district councils will do with the additional modelling and software expertise that will be in place by then. Councillor Broad's comment about behind the meter effectively. So
sorry, Mark, just very quickly, there was one other comment which was about whether the funding comes back to local communities, and yet that all sounds sensible with to what
Yeah.
to earlier.
So that's in a way what business model is decided for a various projects. So there will be a lot of community energy projects that will come off the back of local energy plans. There's undoubtedly there'll be a lot of community energy projects where the funds will flow back into the local community. There'll be some, like heat networks, for argument's sake, where that might, just because of the sums involved, that a private sector company might want to deliver those heat networks. I think it will very much depend on the project. We're not actually specifying as part of the LEAPs that all this, that there has to be sort of a community reinvestment aspect to it. That comes next in terms of the delivery plan. And that's what we want to work with the sort of finance and investment consultants to understand how we can make that happen. And we've got the Low Carbon Hub is one of the members of the governance structure. So clearly they've got an interest in supporting local community energy projects and expanding the impact of local community energy. So it's in there, but we can't necessarily specify for it within the plan, because it depends on the projects that come out of the plan and the delivery mechanism and the business models that will be decided upon, I guess, for those projects.
Brilliant. Chair, if I may, can I just come in with a recommendation on that point to say that to propose a recommendation from the Scrutiny Committee that as part of this report and in setting up for the next stage, that everything possible is done to promote projects that will lead to funds coming back to the local community.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would argue with that, Charlie. So we'll certainly put that in the in our report. Mark, is there anything else you need? Are there anything else you've?
There was a question about gas, and I just want to say we have to understand that gas will be around for a while. We're just not going to be able to turn off gas even in the next 10 years, probably, because of the scope, the requirements for people to be able to continuously heat their homes efficiently and not at sort of ruinous expense. That presupposes that gas doesn't become, that policy decisions around the price of gas don't change. But I think we have to expect that gas will be in the mix for a while longer. The other question about office capacity. So I probably didn't make it clear in my presentation, but all of the work that's gone into this so far has been a sort of collaborative effort between all of the district councils, the county council, the distribution network operators, the LEP, the Local Economic Partnership. And there's been a lot of discussion about office capacity, and that's one of the reasons why we needed to put in these mitigation factors about having stage gates within the contract, which would enable the district councils to have some comfort about being able to commit offices and then having the ability to essentially withdraw them if they felt it was just not appropriate. So all those discussions have been had with district councils at length. I'm just trying to read my writing here. Oh, local plans. So yes, no, local plans will, in terms of local plan development and implementation, won't be impinged upon by local air energy plans. Local air energy plans don't have sort of seniority over over local plans. Local air energy planning will be delivered through the planning process. Obviously, where councils are still in the process of developing local plans, there might be an opportunity to integrate some of the early work that's coming out of local energy plan work into their local plan thinking. But I think it's more likely that the next revision of local plans will be the ones that fully integrate local energy planning into the local plan process. And that's all I've written down. So
Okay, that's good. Thanks, Mark. It's been a long evening. We're very grateful for you, as it were, hanging on in there.
No, you're welcome.
The future of local plans, and because we've got a lot of local plans in the county that are in the factory, for update, different stages. and that's going to be, they may be affected by, we mentioned earlier the potential of a new national planning framework, new standard method, all sorts of stuff that may
Regional, who knows,
make them almost go back to the beginning. Sigh. But it's possible. And so it may be that energy planning coincidentally will catch up with a delayed planning system. But I think Emily's point earlier was what we don't want to trigger by accident is energy planning stalling the factory of making local plans by accident, really. And I think you've assured us that that's not the intent. Now, I haven't got any more hands.
you have actually, but for some reason mine's gone down.
Oh, blimey. If I had control over the hands button, I used it. Go on.
Yeah, no, Chair, thank you. I really was just wanting to emphasise the gateways. I think are an important part of this to go back to FOP with and say we absolutely need those gateways. And of course, to Charlie's point, we don't know yet whether we're going to get an income stream back against this cost. So on those grounds alone, it's wholly appropriate to have gateways so that we have options going forwards. And for my part, I would just propose to everybody that understanding the network now and understanding a full adapted one in 2050 are the key points that we could actually put our hands on with some certainty. The bit in the middle is incredibly complicated and is going to move around a lot. And how much we invest in that might have to be the one that's in the second gateway or third gateway. We'll decide whether that seems to make sense in the climate of the time.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Lee. Kevin, is there any guidance you need from me or members about feedback on this?
Well, as usual, I will review what's been said and what I have written, and I will come up with some summary words of wisdom, as it were, and which I'll run by you initially, and then the wider panel. But yeah, there's enough to be getting on with. I guess the crux is anyone, the recommendation is still the recommendation to the FOP is option 4.
Yeah. No one has said, oh no, you don't. All that people have said is, oh, hold on, there's a bit of a reservation here and a reservation there. And so that needs to be the drift of what we report back. And I think the districts appear to have, as it were, negotiated gateways or trigger points or something whereby the business of officer capacity is likely to be catered for. But it may be that we will have to re-emphasize the need for
and you can sorry,
yeah.
Chair, you can re-emphasize that in your address
because
FOP as well.
Districts, per force these days operate on a shoestring in terms of officer capacity, I mean, as well as money. Alex, final word from you?
Yeah, I was just to say, I think another thing that would be really important to sort of push forward in terms of recommendations is the point that's already been made by Charlie and James regarding that sort of building up of capacity and that sort of looking towards the future and making sure that as the plans sort of come through, there is that internal build-up of capacity as well as some of the sort of proposals of bringing in external support.
I see what you mean. Yeah, homegrown rather than buy inexpensive consultants. That's the drift of it, isn't it? Yeah. How many times have I heard that before? Yeah,
that is the whole point of work stream 2.
Yes, good. Good. Okay, you're ahead of us, Mark. Okay, well, in that case, I think that concludes that agenda item. The final one is to note the
Chair,
dates.
I just think it would be worth us saying thank you for that report, because it is a
Indeed,
good report.
yes,
we've had plenty of debate,
right.
but it's a good report, so thank you.
Absolutely right.
I'll pass on my thanks to the other officers because it's a joint effort, as you can imagine.
Yeah. No, much appreciated though, and if you could pass that back down the line for us, Mark, that'd be good. So the dates of the next meeting are as set out. I don't propose to have a 4-hour debate on their suitability. in that, with that, I think only remains for me to thank members for attending and for officers for the excellent reports that we've had. I should say, as a matter of, if you like, course or matter of culture or matter of style for me going forward, as well as not spending too much time just noting stuff that, you know, is only to note. I think also I will always look to have an agenda that easily concludes itself by 8:30. I think that 2 hours a meeting is long enough. Otherwise, you just lose the capacity to keep your brain on the subject, basically. So that will be my intent. Very grateful for everyone. I'm not sure what I've bitten off here, whether it was a good or a bad idea now. But anyway, look forward to seeing you next time. The meeting is closed.
Jolly good. Cheerio, everyone.